This will be our last in our series, Refresh series, and today I'd been planning on this one and thought that in honor of Valentine's Day it would fit right here very well. And so we're going to talk today about refreshing your marriage. Refresh your marriage. So that's what we're going to get into. Now I understand that not everyone in the room is married, and I recognize that. So I guess you have a couple of options as you sit and we go through the morning. If you're not married this morning, maybe someday you might be. So this could be helpful future information. Or maybe you know a married couple and you want to just kind of hold that couple in your thoughts and prayers as we go through the day. Maybe, even though we're talking about marriage, I think in it God might find something that he wants to share with you specifically, and there might be a message anyways. Now, if you think that none of that applies to you and none of that's going to really be helpful for you and your time would be better spent down the hall drinking coffee, this is your time to go ahead and make your way out, and the rest of us will see what God has for us. But I want to talk about refreshing your marriage. And for those that are married, could you stand a fresh breath, a fresh wind of joy and blessing in your marriage today? Do you think that you could benefit from God maybe bringing new life into your relationship? I want to tell you that God wants you to have a strong and healthy partnership in marriage. And that's his design for you, for your marriage. That God designed that a man and a woman would share a bond together that would help them work through the challenges of life, would help them build a better, more blessed life, and would give you the ability to, even through marriage, make an impact in the world around you. That's specifically what we'll talk about today. But I've just discovered that husbands and wives don't always work together. I've seen that. I mean, on occasion. They don't always see eye to eye. They don't always work through things well. So we're going to talk about working together instead of maybe fighting together. And to do that, I want to go to 2 Kings chapter 4. If you'd like to turn there with me. 2 Kings chapter 4. And if you haven't read 2 Kings for a while, it's a little bit to the left of half the Bible, the center of the Bible. So go to the middle and head backwards. You'll find it. 2 Kings chapter 4, the story of a husband and wife, a couple that have an opportunity to serve the Lord. And we'll read the story, take a couple breaks, and hopefully learn something this morning. Down in verse 8 is where our story begins. 2 Kings 4, verse 8. It says this: One day Elisha went on to Shunam. Now Elisha is a prophet of God, where a wealthy woman lived who urged him to eat some food. So whenever he passed that way, he would turn in there to eat food. And she said to her husband, "Behold now, I know that this is a holy man of God who is continually passing our way. Let us make a small room on the roof with walls and put there for him a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp, so that whenever he comes to us, he can go in there." Okay, so stop right there for just a minute. And let's let you know what's going on. This Shunamite woman is described in the translation we just read as a wealthy woman. Some translations said she was a prominent woman or a great woman, a notable woman, if you will. But the text is really just pointing out that she's an important woman. And when a woman gets kind of pointed out in this way in the Old Testament, what they're really saying is she's wealthy. She had a lot of money. And the story is really about her and her husband. But notice how this text it describes her, which is another unusual thing about the Old Testament. That women were not considered to be the ones with money. They were not considered to be people of, they were not property owners, and they were not described as the notable ones. And this seems significant when you think about the custom of that point in history when women did not really have wealth and property. And so for the Bible to mention that she is the one that was wealthy, the inference here is that the husband somehow married into money in this case. He's the one that married into the money. And this woman gets an idea because she noticed that this prophet Elijah would come through town. And so she would see him as he's traveling, ministering, serving God, doing his work. And she starts inviting him over to the house for a meal. Pretty soon she builds a relationship, and she thinks, I like what he's doing. I like what he's about. I can tell that he's a holy man. And I think we have resources here. We could do something extra for him. And she gets this idea that she wants to add a room onto the house so that when he comes through town, he could stay there. He could turn in there and he could rest. He could maybe go in there and pray. He could maybe have meetings there or whatever. But she wants to give him a place where he stays when he comes through town. Now, it's interesting that this room is already built in her mind. Notice how she's got the room figured out. She knows where she wants it to be. She knows what it wants to look like. She knows how she's going to decorate it. But she wants to go and get permission from her husband. She wants to ask him about his thoughts and get him on board with this idea. One Saturday morning, we were having breakfast at our house and watching like a home improvement show. And we're watching the show, and in this particular case, they had remodeled this living room, and they built this really, really neat kind of little part on the wall and put an electric fireplace on it. It looked really pretty and it was really interesting. And Sandy turns to me and she says, "Hey, what do you think about redoing the fireplace and putting up an electric fireplace like that?" And we started talking about that and thinking about, that'd be a pretty good idea. And I kind of like that. And it would look really nice. Well, little did I know, she had it all planned. She had colors picked. She knew where we were going to get the fireplace. She had it all figured out exactly what it was going to be. And I think that very afternoon, we're already preparing the wall and building this little thing on it, and shopping for the fireplace and all this. And I didn't think about it at the time. I look back now and I realize, but I actually kind of thought it was my idea. When it was all done, I was taking pictures of our progress, and I'm showing everybody, "Hey, look it, we built this fireplace in our living room. Isn't it cool?" And we're showing everybody. And little did I know, she had it kind of all worked out in her mind how it was going to go. But that's what this wealthy woman does. That's what this lady does. She comes to her husband and says, "Hey, what do you think, honey? Well, what do you think if we built this room for this prophet?" And he comes through town, and we can give him a place to rest and pray and so forth. And you know what she's doing here? She's being wise. I mean, she knew what she wanted. She knew what it was going to look like. She had the means to make it happen, and she could have just taken over and made it happen. But she's being wise, and she's slowing down. And she's getting her husband involved in the process of determining what was going on. Maybe she asked him, like, do you know where we can get a chair, honey, that would go in the room? Where do you think up on the, you kind of imagine them going up on the roof and kind of looking around. Where do you think we should put this room? Should it be over on this side? And he gets to throw it, that's not a load-bearing area. So it'd be better if the room was over here, and he kind of gets to have his input on the project. And she gets him involved. It could have been that he come home one day, been out in the field working and full days, of labor, and he's hot, he's tired, he's sweaty, he's been fighting with laborers all day long, he's dirty from working the ground or whatever, and he comes home and he walks up and he starts noticing some things. There's debris out on the lawn. There's a pile of lumber that's already been delivered. There's contractors going in and out of the house, and he could be going, well, what's going on here? But that's not what happened at all. she came to him and she says, what's your opinion? What do you think? What do you think would be a good idea? And after they lay it out, he's realizing this is a good idea. We've got the resources to make it happen. There's a purpose behind this that fits what our lives are about and what we want to do. Sure, honey, this is a great idea. Let's do it. Because notice how after she talks to him and says, talks to him about Elisha and says that she wants to build this room. Then she says, let us put in a bed and a chair and a lamp. And she makes it about them together. And so there's no problem here. There's no issue because they work together on this goal or this idea. Is that how you do it? You know, when you've got, you're thinking about how you're going to use your resources. Whatever, you have time, you have treasures, and you have talents. When you think about how you want to use your resources, do you go to your spouse first and say, what do you think, honey? Is this a good idea? Does this fit with your plans and your idea too? And you work together. And to do that, you need wisdom. You have to become a team. You have to figure out how to make these kinds of decisions together. It doesn't work to be married and still operate with an independent spirit. And a lot of couples struggle with this concept, with this idea, because we're so individualistic. Our culture, our society is so independent. The Bible teaches us to be interdependent, to learn how to work together, to learn how to support one another, to learn how to do things together. But everything in our culture says, just take care of yourself. You deserve it. Just worry about your own. James 4, 1 through 2 says, what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have, and so you murder, you covet, you cannot obtain, and so you fight and quarrel because you do not have, because you do not ask. I mean, how does that apply to a marriage? You don't have because you just didn't ask. Instead, we go into combat mode to get what we want, what I want, what suits me and my needs. Verses go on to describe how our jealousies and our selfishness is at war within us, and says that we instead need to turn and learn how to submit ourselves to God and be humble and communicate and work together. I had never heard this, although when I was reading about this, I can see it. But apparently there's a growing trend called LAT, or Living Apart Together. That's what it stands for, Living Apart Together. And it's couples that choose to be together. They choose to be in a relationship together, either married or unmarried. And even if they're married, they choose to be in a monogamous relationship together, but they figure they get along better if they don't live together. Even as married couples, they decide that their relationship is better if they don't learn how to work together and how to live together. And so they maintain separate residences, and then they just get together whenever they feel like it or it suits their interests and needs. Now, I said it's actually a growing trend. It's got a name now. 10% of couples in Great Britain identify this way. There's over 2 million married couples in Canada that identify this way. And it's a growing expression even in the U.S. And I read some stories, I watched some videos, and so forth. So even married couples are saying, we want to be married, we just can't get along. We just can't work together. We can't live together. We are such a selfish people. And it can be so challenging and so difficult for us to learn how to work together and to think of one another, to think of others more highly than ourselves. It infiltrates every part of our worlds. I mean, the most common photograph today is now the selfie. I've done so many funerals where they've asked me to maybe help with a video. And I've had this conversation so many times when people say, it's a video for mom, or it's a video for dad or whatever. So we had a hard time finding pictures of mom or dad because they were always behind the camera. They were always taking pictures of the family. They were always interested in the family. They were always doing things for the family, and it was hard to come up with photos of them. Not anymore. You just take selfies. You just take pictures of yourself. This is me in my hat. This is me eating my lunch. This is me laying on the sofa. This is me with a sandwich. This is me with this and that, and you got thousands and thousands of photos of just you and nobody else. The last thing we need in this world is more selfness. And how many marriages are failing because selfness is the rule? I want, I deserve, I need, I take. But now here comes this wealthy woman. It was her money. It was her idea. It was her interest. She saw it first. She saw the need. She could have taken the credit. She could have made herself look good. And she goes, honey, what do you think? Well, let's have a discussion here about this and get your thoughts on the matter. And when she did, it was no problem. And they blessed this prophet Elijah together. So let's go on in verse 11. One day he came there, and he turned into the chamber and rested there. So what happened? They built the room. Okay, it goes from idea to reality. They built this room, and now he's able to come in from his journey and his travels, and he can visit this family, and he gets a nice, warm, home-cooked meal, and then he can retire to this room that they've made for him, and he can be rested and ready to continue on his journey and serve the Lord. Isn't that great? Idea moves to plan, moves to reality, because this couple worked together. And even on a little side note, they actually added property value to their home. I don't know how that worked back then, but they actually increased their home. And so they had even value in what they did. But it's wonderful. They accomplished a good thing because they worked together. The man gets to go down to the local pub and brag to all of his buddies about what he did. He gets to tell all of his friends, my wife and I, we built a new room on the house. Pretty cool. We got a chair in there and a bed and a lamp and all this stuff. And they worked together and became a blessing to this prophet. They served the Lord. And that's what happens when you work together. When couples work together, you build your home. You have access to to the finances that can help you maybe have a nicer home or a nicer car or good food. You work together on how to discipline and raise good children, healthy children, educated children, well-behaved children, because you work together as a married couple. You have access to things, maybe like health care. I here at the church, I don't set any money aside for health care. So Sandy, we've always kind of looked at what she could do to find a job that would provide health care for our family. And so without being a burden on the church, we still have what we need that way for the family. And we work together, so it helps us out financially and with health care and all that kind of thing. When you work together, it provides greater resources and greater opportunities to do some things. And you can build a glorious life and a happy home together. But contrast that with couples that don't seem to figure out how to work together, but instead tear apart and set about kind of tearing down and destroying instead of building up and what they can do. You have to watch your attitude. You have to be wise in your decision making. You have to learn how to talk to each other and figure these things out. There's nothing worse than going home after a long day, and on the drive you're going, I think I'd rather go back to work. I'd rather go back and fight in the office instead of fighting at home. There's people that dread going home. Don't be that person for your husband. Don't be that person for your wife. Maybe she's already at home thinking, oh, Lord, he's going to be here in a couple of minutes. Be the kind of person where they're excited that you're home. You're excited to go home. Your home is your sanctuary where you get to find rest, and you get to be around people that love you and care for you. Protect that carefully so that you enjoy being together. Is your marriage, and this is kind of our guiding question, is your marriage a partnership that helps you serve God? What are your talents? What kind of time do you have available? What treasures and resources are at your disposal? And how do you and your husband, your wife, how do you work together to use those things for His glory? Or are you just kind of building your own little kingdom, your own little world, your own little wants, your own little things? Are you being selfish with your time, your talents, and treasures? Or can you partner together to use those things and find unique ways that you can do something for the Lord? Isn't it interesting that when couples fight and tear down, but how interesting in this story that this wise woman found a way to work with her husband and do something incredible. What new ministry could be born? What young couple could you mentor? What new opportunity could you find where God would say, hey, if you did this together, it could make a difference? Let's look at just a little bit more of the story. Verse 12. And he said to Gehazi, his servant, this is now Elisha talking to his servant Gehazi, and he said, call this Shunamite woman. And when he had called her, she stood before him. And he said to him, say now to her, so to his servant Gehazi, go and talk, says, go over to her and say now to her, see, you have taken all this trouble for us. What is to be done for you? Would you have a word spoken on your behalf to the king or the commander of the army? And she answered, I dwell among my own people. So Elisha's now sitting there in his own room. He's all relaxing. He's out of the sun. His belly's full. And he's thinking, man, this is really nice. This is really something what they've done for me. And so he gets his servant, says, you know what, go get that woman of the house and have her come up here and ask her, now that you've done something for me, is there something I can do for you? You've shown me favor. Is there something I can do to show you favor? Is there a way that, you've kind of scratched my back, I can scratch yours? That's kind of the what's going on here. And he even has an idea. He says, I know important people. Here, you're a prominent woman about town. You're a person of influence. I see you're the kind of person that likes to make things happen and be proactive about stuff. I could put in a good word with the king or the commander. You play your cards right. I give you the right nod, and you're eating at banquet in the king's court before you know it. But what's her answer? She says, no, that's okay. I belong here among my people. I'm not doing this for favor. I'm not doing this for recognition. I'm not doing this to make myself look good. I'm not doing this for my own kingdom and my own purposes. I'm doing this to serve the Lord. It's because of that, he answers in verse 14. And he says, what then is to be done for her? Gehazi answered, well, she has no son, and her husband is old. And he said, then call her. And when he has called her, she stood at the doorway. And he said, at this season, about this time next year, you shall embrace a son. And she said, no, my Lord, O man of God, do not lie to your servant. And the woman conceived, and she bore a son about that time the following spring, and just as Elisha had said to her. And so because she was humble, because she didn't request anything he master's servant. What does she need? What would things she need? Back in this day and age, a woman that was barren and didn't have children, not only maybe missed out on the joy of raising a family, maybe not only did she maybe carry some jealousy or concern or even that longing that I never got to have a child. But in addition to that, they're often outcast and looked down upon by the community. Sometimes they thought that maybe she was cursed. The wife was cursed. It was never the husband's fault. It was always the wife's fault. And they thought that maybe she was cursed or something's wrong with her. There's some reason. And maybe she walked down the street through the marketplace. The other mothers, over in the next aisle over, they would talk quietly to each other and point at her. Something was wrong with her, and she carries this shame that she's not a mom. In fact, when Elisha offers and says, "I notice you have no child. Well, I want to tell you that by this time, this season, next year, you will have a child in your arms." And she says, no, don't say that to me. She's thinking it's impossible. I've never been able to have a child. Now I'm an older lady. I'm beyond the age when I could have a child. Don't get my hopes up. Don't tell me this is going to happen, because it just doesn't seem possible. And yet she conceives and is given a child. What a blessing. What an incredible gift that she's given by serving the Lord in such a great way. When husbands and wives live that selfish life for themselves, it brings so much trouble and so much pain and so much hurt and so much struggle and things that take place and happen in that selfishness. But when they learn to work together and they learn how to be wise in what they do, and then they take that opportunity that God's given them and they use it to bring glory and honor to God, and they want their lives to count for His purposes and His callings and His will on earth, they move into a blessing that can't be known any other way. You move into a place where God begins to do incredible things in and through your life. I mean, in the onset, it kind of seems like they made a sacrifice. They gave up a space in their room, in their house. They used their resources. Now every time he comes to town, they've got to be responsible for him. But God blessed them with so much in return, more than they could have possibly expected, because they made themselves available to the Lord. Isn't that how God works? When you serve Him, and when you seek Him, and when you work for Him, He blesses you in return in so many incredible ways. In the moment, in the struggle, in the day-to-day, it may not seem that way, but then a blessing comes that you never expected. God shows up in your life in a way that you never would have imagined. God does something because you were faithful. And you just know how good it is to be in the presence of the Lord.